Greetings YouTube, welcome to a spine-tingling and blood-curdling episode. My name is Gray and I invite you to join me in descending the steps of the Consoletronix crypt as I look to exhume the corpse of the first high-profile horror franchise, whose reputation in the world of video games over the years, from 80s arcade brawler to 21st century HD gorefest, has mirrored the trashy low-budget slasher and zombie flicks that were its inspiration, in my Splatterhouse series review. Nothing gets my hot red North London blood pumping quite like a good horror experience, and in 1988 Namco would look to capitalise on the horror boom of the 80s to bring us Splatterhouse, a game that in its day courted some controversy with its visceral graphics and copious amounts of blood and gore soaked levels, which seems weird now. I mean, look at it, but was actually a bit of a novelty at the time, as while violence had always been a staple of gaming, horror not so much. And while Splatterhouse would be derided by some for its basic side-scrolling gameplay and lack of moves, its visuals and level designs kept the video nasty lovers like myself coming back for more. While Japanese exclusive home computer system the FM Towns would get a virtual arcade perfect port, the home release of Splatterhouse on the increasingly airbrushed out of history third 16-bit system, the NEC PC Engine, was a very big deal. Not just in the States where it was available with the rebranded TurboGrafx 16, but here in Europe the grey import scene was growing rapidly in the early 90s as PC engines were being imported and sold in many high street stores. And Splatterhouse was just one of many games the system possessed that made it, for me, something I wanted to get my hands on even more than Pamela Anderson. Well, Nintendo did get a Splatterhouse game. Sort of. Splatterhouse Wanpaku Graffiti does indeed feature ever-present series star Rick, the mask that gives him his powers, and his chronically kidnapped girlfriend Jennifer. But that's where the similarities end, folks. And while most just assume this is another example of Nintendo's strict censorship criteria, I always got the feeling that Namco may in fact have been trying to tap into the fanbases of popular late 80s supernatural themed manga and anime like the long-running Gegege no Kitaro. That's this fella right here. But if you've been avoiding this Japanese exclusive Famicom port because you thought it for kids, try it. I guarantee you, you won't be disappointed. Now, a lot of people today believe the first sequel in the Splatterhouse franchise was a Mega Drive exclusive because Nintendo objected to the supposed violence in the game. Not so. Like a lot of video games history, the reason is a little more complex, because Namco, a long-time developer for the Famicom, was, like most other big Japanese studios, tied down to restrictive exclusivity contracts, whose terms were dictated by Nintendo alone. In fact, Namco were the first big studio to sever ties with Nintendo and develop instead for their main rival Sega, with not just Splatterhouse but Rolling Thunder sequels and more, before others like Konami followed suit. In fact, there's always been a question mark in the back of my mind why Sega wouldn't or couldn't keep Namco on board for longer. Imagine how different the 32-bit era would have been had Ridge Racer, Tekken or Soul Blade, the first Soul Calibur game, been Sega Saturn exclusives. For those who don't follow retro religiously like myself, you'd be forgiven for thinking the 16-bit era was a tad bit samey, full of platformers and fighting games and not much else. But the truth is, it was a constantly changing and evolving period in gaming. Sadly though, by 1993, the year the third installment in the Splatterhouse series, once more Mega Drive exclusive, hit store shelves, the novelty had well and truly worn off. Gamers were looking for more depth and variety, so gave the starting to show its age horror sequel a wide berth, meaning it didn't even get an official European release. And many didn't even know it existed until YouTube came around. But while it's lacking where it counts, like its predecessors, it's still fun to play and worth tracking down a copy.
We can save her if you show me some faith, if you trust me, if you put me on.
While I've heard it said in some quarters that none of the Splatterhouse games are all that good, they are at least fun to play. But in 2010, Namco, now Namco Bandai, decided they would attempt to resurrect the long dormant franchise with a fresh installment for the Xbox 360 and PS3. And I had a feeling in my water that it probably wouldn't go down well with the so-called video game critics. But any game that lets you rip a monster's intestines out through his arse and then garrot his mates with it is always going to get my seal of approval, because that's exactly what this game is, a sleazy late night B-movie of a game, and I love it for it. So folks, there we have it, a look back at a series that has always sold itself on its graphic content rather than any great gameplay innovations. But so what? They're fun, and somewhere along the way, fun has been relegated, sacrificed upon the altar of graphics. But this is why retro is not only relevant, but important. So thank you for watching, more videos up soon, and I'm out. Laters.